Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the Norse in Age of Mythology Retold. And they might just be the weakest civilization slash faction slash race in the game at the moment. And certainly the Norse have struggled for quite a few years in Age of Mythology. Basically, Chinese were so overpowered that people literally threw them out the door when it came to playing the game online. Greeks are good. Egyptians, the way Egyptians work is they might not have the army in terms of like individual unit quality, but they have a really powerful economy that can help them get ahead, so they can spam. They're kind of like the Zerg of Age of Mythology. Atlanteans have quality, but they also have a good economy to back it up. Norse have quality of units and myth units, but they have a couple of problems. Their god powers, if you look at the list of god powers, with the major exception of the Nidhogg, but their god powers are more so support powers. Like you get healing, you get things like, undermining a wall. You do have flaming weapons, sure, but it's all like support. You don't have something like a meteor or an earthquake or a lightning storm, and that is one issue. But beyond that, with respect to the Norse, they suffer from ranged combat. So their infantry is really good, their cavalry is really good, their myth units are strong, extremely strong, but a bit on the, or not just a bit, very much so on the expensive side. Like, you look at the amount of favor, and you gotta understand, gaining favor with the Norse can be a bit problematic. Depends on how you're trading, how many engagements you're going through in a combat situation. But the myth units can get the job done. Of course, myth units can be hard countered. But the real problem in the Norse is their lack of ranged. You get throwing axemen, which are good against infantry, but they're not good against archers. You also have the addition of the Godi, which are kind of like the skirmishers of Age of Empires 2 right now. And you do have an anti-ranged option with the Huskarl, who have a good amount of piercing damage protection. Of course, relying on a melee unit, regardless of how well protected it is, relying on a melee unit to deal with mass archers can be a bit problematic, because you still have to worry about pathfinding. Now, the problem for the Norse is not necessarily the Egyptians. It depends on the trade, right? You have a far more powerful army, but they have a more powerful economy, and how you manage that, it can go either way. The issue, however, is with the Greeks, and in particular Hades. So the issue with Hades has a lot of range power ability, and the Norse, you think, oh, they can excel at raiding. Yeah, but Hades is really strong in terms of defense. Range fortification, range soldier, range, sentinel ability, which, yeah, you can cast multiple times. I think like the Norse, when it comes to the ability of using god powers multiple times, kind of come out in the worst position, because being able to use sentinels multiple times, earthquake multiple times, lightning bolt, all that, can hurt you quite a bit compared to, what god powers you do have as the Norse, which are mainly support, not necessarily direct damage abilities. So you do have some benefits like Loki, Odin, right? Odin has regeneration, Thor has various upgrades. So it's all about building an elite army. Like Thor is about infantry, Odin is about cavalry, mainly, like those are the bigger benefits, and Loki is about the myth units. But without the range capability, you end up in a weakness. And your opponent knows they can defeat you from a range combat perspective, because you only get anti-range units at tier 3, with all the problems that come with that. You have throwing axemen at tier 2, but basically Toxotes will run in circles around these guys. Like, if you build these guys against Toxotes, you will lose. And that creates problems. Oh, what about mass cavalry? Well, any Greek player worth a damn, regardless of which god they're going with, is obviously going to build a decent amount of hoplites from tier 2. And you're just going to end up falling behind in that perspective. So I think that is something of a problem. How Microsoft decides to tackle this going forward in terms of balancing, I guess we'll find out, right? How that is going to play out. But anyway, that is just a concern. It might create problems in the multiplayer meta. I'm just highlighting it right now. I've tried playing the Norse in quite a few games online. I didn't want to jump in as Greeks because I knew how it would go down. I also know how Egyptians would go down, and you know, based on what I've seen others do, it's pretty much as expected. Norse are also as expected, and don't know about the Atlanteans. It seems they're not finished. But regardless, let's consider the various gods of the Norse and what they have on offer. So starting with 4, you get dwarves instead of gatherers. Dwarves are better at mining gold, right? 4's benefit with dwarves is he starts with them, and they also gather food and wood faster than regular dwarves. I think it's about the same level as gatherer, with that plus 25% benefit. Then you can also build a dwarven armory in tier 1. So even as you're making that transition from tier 1 to tier 2, you can already start building your army to instantly transition in tier 3, which might be just something you want to go for. You also get a free dwarf for each dwarven armory upgrade. So basically upgrades might pay for themselves, at least the early ones, right? Later on you get significant combat benefits if you do end up in a myth age. But I think like 4 is more useful in either a long game, if you're playing that kind of long game, or he's more useful in team games, long team games. Because if he booms, if he builds up, and he gets all those upgrades, he will flat out have probably the strongest melee army in the game. Infantry army. So if you're going with an infantry playstyle, or just human playstyle in general, it can work very well. Then you have Odin. Odin is kind of the opposite. Like 4 might be about building it up. Odin is about quite a bit of early game aggression. So he gets more food, he gets scouting capability, and he gets regeneration. So the thing with the Odin, it's all about hit and run tactics when you're looking at it. Also, by the way, let's talk about god powers just a second. So for your Herseers, inflict additional damage in favor faster, melee attack, and also they work faster with respect to favor. And also he gets a gold mine. Now, with this gold mine, you gain more gold from it, depending on the age you're using it in. But now, since you can reuse god powers, you can, it was already a strategy that a lot of people use, that you would pop a dwarven mine from the very beginning, because that way you could use your ox cart, send it on food, and just keep your initial dwarves on it. But now you just have more incentive to do so, because you can always spawn another one later on. So 4 technically can't run out of gold. So this is what I mean about him getting a very strong army, because again, like that infinite level of gold is really strong. With Odin, we get Hamask, which gives berserkers the ability to move and attack faster as they lose hit points. So for every HP they get speed. For every HP lost, they gain speed and damage, which is pretty useful. And then they can regenerate it after. So like hit and run tactics, either cavalry or infantry, that can work. Also, he gives you more food with the Grey Hunt as well. So he's really focused on food. 4 is focused on gold, but not just gold, also favor with respect to that. And then we have Loki. So his focus is myth units. Damaging enemy units can spawn myth units. So all the Norse are focused on rain. The reason that doesn't work is, like, if a Greek is fighting you, it's really going to come down to the Greeks. If the Greeks are fighting you, it's like you're fighting Hades, because Hades kind of feels like it's going to be able to hard counter anything the Norse do. And Sentinels, like, so much for your raiding with Sentinels. That would be tricky. But when you damage enemy units, you can spawn myth units, and Herseers contribute a lot to this. Human soldiers and heroes inflict 25% bonus damage. Buildings are constructed faster. And gatherers and dwarves transforming into berserkers is cheaper. His abilities, Loki causes nearby enemy units of Mother Nature, such as trees and animals, to temporarily grant vision. And then you get Spy to be able to see what the enemy is doing. So he's really good in some ways at map control in that particular respect. Okay, now let's take a look at the various minor gods. So in tier 2, you either are going to get Freya, or you're going to get Forseti, or you're going to get Heimdall, depending on who you're picking. Freya gives you Forest Fire. It's situational as all hell, though it could be used to harass the enemy tree line. So it's all about supporting the harassed, raiding, punishing the enemy. You get Valkyries. This might be more useful if you're playing Odin, because you get a cavalry unit. You might want to focus on cavalry as Odin. They aren't necessarily the cheapest, but they do heal. They do have that capability of healing. Also, she improves the HP of heroes, so if you're going with a lot of heroes as the Norse, depending on who you're fighting, that can be useful. And she also gives you cavalry and Valkyrie speed and HP. Pretty useful in that respect. Forseti, he gives you Healing Spring, which you can spawn, heal your units. It's not the fastest healing, like a Valkyrie, an individual Valkyrie can heal an individual unit faster, but obviously Healing Spring is, it's just there. You put that up, you can heal your units. He gets Trolls, and then he can also upgrade those Trolls to Cave Trolls with special attacks that are significantly stronger. So Trolls, they're kind of a glass cannon unit, and really without too much of the cannon aspect. Like, they die quickly, but with their special attack, which does AoE damage in this, they can be useful against clumps of enemies. It's not good enough to deal with mass range, but it can be useful to support your main army in a melee fight. That's one of the roles over here. You also get Hall of Thanes, which improves the speed of all foot soldiers, especially heroes. So you get hero benefits, and then he gives you, he reduces the vulnerability to hack attacks. So the way you could view Forseti is like, if you're dealing with a melee opponent, he might be the one you want to go for, if you're going down that infantry path with him. Then with Heimdall, looking at him, he has Undermine, so if you have enemies that are building a lot of walls, he's a really good choice in that respect. The myth unit he spawns is not necessarily Einhar. The Einhar, they're not necessarily the best unit. They can be decent, but they're kind of a cheap chaff unit, as much as a chaff unit exists for a myth unit. So they will go down easily enough, but they can offer some benefits, right, in combat. He does improve your walls, which, if you're looking for a more defensive playstyle with the Norse, that can help you. Though Norse are not really great at defense in general, but he can give you that. And he increases the speed at which your buildings, train units, and research technologies, including advancing to the next age. So you can get to a higher age faster. This is particularly important with Loki, because one of the things that can win you the game flat out is getting the Nidhogg. Like, just pushing for the Nidhogg, it's gonna be difficult for an enemy to kill it, especially if you've beaten them to tier 4. Like, if you're using this against a tier 4 army, different discussion, but if you're using it against a tier 3 army, it could work in your favor. Maybe not against the Egyptians if they've got a lot of priests. Certainly not against Ra. Okay, at tier 3, your gods are either Skadi, Bragi, and then Njord as the 3 choices. So Skadi, she has Frost Giants. Now, the Frost ability, it can stop the enemy army, but what you don't want to do when you've used it is to actually keep fighting that enemy army, because you're not going to kill a lot of it. What you want to do in this, you want to use this potentially when you're pushing on the enemy base, and then destroy as much of the enemy base as possible, kill villagers, all that, because you're not really going to be effective at killing the enemy army. Frost Giants can act as a good support unit. Don't expect a lot of damage from these guys, but they can freeze enemies individually. She does get benefits for throwing axemen. She does also have, crucially, one of the few tech benefits that you get from a god with the Norse with Winter's Harvest. So this gives you a food benefit. And then she enchants your Drakkar with Arctic Gale, affecting their attacks to slow down and even freeze enemies. With Bragi, you get flaming weapons, so a lot of combat benefits in terms of that. You get the Battle Boar. The Battle Boar is not necessarily a great damage unit. It's more like a support melee unit that can take a good amount of damage, can also throw enemies around, so it can be useful in that respect. You get benefits for Berserkers. You also get Mythic Unit Speed and Regeneration, which might be useful. Though, keeping in mind, you're probably going to have... You can generally go with some healing, unless you're, you're going with Loki and you're going with Heimdall. That might not necessarily matter quite as much. But, every bit of healing does help. Then he also buffs melee attack damage for Herdmen, which are your anti-cav unit. It's a new unit that was added to deal with cav. So your Berserkers are no longer anti-cav. They're general purpose infantry, and you get the Herdmen as an anti-cav unit, a new unit. Adds to melee attack damage bonus against cav, so you do get that, and then you get a longbow benefit. Then we have Njord. Njord gives you the Mountain Giant, the Walking Woods, the Ring Giver. So he's buffing Jarls. Jarls are elite. The way they work right now, if we look at the tech tree, just to show that particular aspect over there. So Jarl are elite heavy cavalry that are good against human soldiers. They're not good against myth units. They used to be good against myth units in the old version. Now they're good against human soldiers. So they changed that around significantly. So if you're dealing with a lot of human soldiers, you might want to go with Njord. You then get Vikings. Raiding cavalry produces gold. Produces gold reward. So yeah, raiding cavalry when fighting enemy units might be a good thing to have it against, like, have like a pillage effect to that, but still, in addition to favor while fighting enemy units, so you can benefit from fighting, getting gold with that. It's probably not worth it if you're doing 4, like you'll have so much gold when you're going 4, but there's obviously, obviously 4 can't even get that. So it makes sense. Like, the god choices are just there to synergize with different playstyles. Then you get more powerful Mountain Giants. Now, Mountain Giants are not great in combat. They're siege units, melee siege units. Like, they're the Norse version of the Colossi. The Colossi are more durable, but the Mountain Giants are exceptional against buildings. They'll destroy buildings. Now, the Jotuns will make them more effective against human soldiers, but I would not expect Mountain Giants to be the top tier unit to use against masses of soldiers. At least they weren't before. Then you get Wrath of the Deep. So you get Deadly Krakens. Now, it's interesting to think about this. So it used to be the case that Krakens, if we consider it, like, let me just switch to 4. It used to be that Krakens were a specific god unit, but now, maybe the Norse aren't the best on land, but they do sure as hell seem like they're gonna dominate the seas, if that matters. Krakens are exceptional at sea combat because they can instant kill ships. That's one of the reasons behind that. But that's about it for tier 3. At tier 4, we get Balder, Tyr, and then only for Loki, Hel. Let me start with Hel. So Hel gives you all of the giants though crucially, you may not have the upgrades for those giants. You certainly will be missing the Frost Giant one. And while you can get regular mountain giants, you may not get Jotuns. Just an important point. If you're gonna go with Hell, you might as well go with Njord to upgrade your mountain giants to Jotuns. But the thing is, mountain giants, you know, getting that upgrade may not be necessary, nor is the Frost Giant benefit, because fire giants are just capable of obliterating everything in their path, buildings, units. So you might use your mountain giants for a dedicated anti-building unit, whereas your fire giants are there to deal with the enemy army. And yeah, the Nidhogg is something. It's quite powerful. She also gives you the ability of training myth units almost instantly. That is crazy. Though you're probably not going to have a lot of power with that. And then yeah, you do get extra HP for your other giants. So more durability, not necessarily you're gonna be missing out that Frost Giant ability, but you will have some HP benefit with Hell. You get Tyr, so the god of warfare and protection. You get Fimbulwinter, so when you're pushing on enemy base, or if you want to harass their economy, this can be useful. The wolves Fimbulwinter spawn, they're not too powerful, but dependent on the town centers where the economy is, you can control them, so they're randomly controlled. So then you get Fenris Wolfbrood and Fenris Wolfbrood. The way these guys used to work, not fully certain about it, but the way they used to work is individually they'd be really weak, but you put them all together and they could do a lot of damage. Could die fast though, but they're not necessarily on the expensive side. And then he upgrades your Berserkers as well to basically get the vampiric aura type effect. Then you get Bravery, which Huskarl add melee attack against buildings, and also melee attack against all types, damage against all types, plus 20%. So he's really about those Huskarls over there with Tyr. And then finally, Baldur, he gets Ragnarok. Ragnarok is an interesting spell. So you do get fire giants, but you don't have the same kind of capability with fire giants as Hell does, and you're also going to miss the Nidhogg. Important to know here, you get better rams, and also yeah, obviously mountain giants are really good, and you get benefits for raiding cavalry. Ragnarok transforms all your gatherers and dwarves into heroes of Ragnarok. It's something that they added with Age of Mythology 2 as well. Sorry, Age of Empires 2. Sorry, what Age of Mythology 2? No, with Age of Empires 2. They added that kind of ability. The heroes, they're heroes to begin with. They're strong, they're capable. Obviously, it's like a really late game push. All in. Mountain Giants can help with that. Dwarven Anger can also help with that. So, yeah, Baldur. So, you know, obviously Baldur is related heavily to Ragnarok. And you know, you see the giants. You can actually get all the giant types. Again, like Hell. Well, no, again, like you technically can get all of them, but you're gonna have to choose between Frost Giants, Mountain Giants. But you could get a lot of really powerful Mountain Giants, maybe more powerful than Hell's Mountain Giants. With weaker Fire Giants, it is a trade-off in quite a few ways. And that would be it about the Norse. The way I'm seeing it, and you know, Titans, that's such a late game thing that I'll be honest, it's not necessarily worth talking about in the game. Like, Titans can be really strong, of course, like they're game-winning units. That would be all. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.